and when they get the system down, they rock it. And I know there's one thing that a subject that we had talked about too is just like the quantifiability of light, which is kind of interesting to the environment and VPD and things like that. So really, really like getting all your variables matched up, right? Because it is a law of the minimum, right? Liebig's law of the minimum. If you have all these things tip top, your nutrients are great, your environment's great, but you don't have enough light, well, that's your minimum. You're only gonna produce to your minimum.
You explain it well, but it's actually...
We're Jug Dealers, we're the podcast you need in your feed. Teaching the game like you've never seen. Jared, Gabe, Rambo, true OGs. Masters of the globe, set your mind free. From Denver, Colorado, where the data's green. We set the data points for the SOPs. Jug Dealers Podcast, yes indeed.
All right. So welcome back, everybody, to another edition of the Jug Dealers Podcast. We're here in the Jug Den. Of course, we have my lovely associate, Josh, behind the glass. The man behind the glass, as I like to say. We do not have Gabe in today, but in place of Gabe, I have a very special interview that we're going to do with my good friend, Jeroen from Dutch Lighting Innovations. So we've got him piped in all the way from across the pond, out there somewhere in Holland. I know, well... Anyway, we'll let him kind of introduce himself. I want to give his a little bit of his background, things like that. But again, we're going to talk some lighting today. We're going to talk about Dutch Lighting Innovations as a company, and then also just some general lighting topics. So anyhow, without further ado, Jeroen, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction, kind of, what you do around the company, a little bit of your history in the industry as far as, some of your lighting experience. Obviously, you're in the Mecca. You're right there. You work at DLI, which is an Osmere, which is, for this kind of stuff and for horticultural lighting, glass house, that kind of technology, it's tops in the world. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, first of all, Jared, thank you for having me and hosting this.
Of course. Wonderful to have you. Thank you.
It's going to be a nice experience, I think. So let's tell a little bit about myself. I work at DLI now for 2 years. Previously, I did a similar thing at a different company for about 6-7 years. So I've been in the industry professionally since about 2015.
Okay.
But before I had some legacy days and
right. And I mean,
left and right.
And speak on, we're pretty open here. So, speak on anything you want. But, and let's even talk a little about, so 2015, you actually get in, into the industry, into specifically in the cannabis side of things, which obviously over there's a ton of cut flower work and things like that. So, but specifically cannabis 2015, what is your history with cannabis? What got you into it? I know, and I don't make any assumptions here, but I know you are a consumer. We have consumed together. So, man, what is, tell us a little bit about your journey with cannabis and what got you here.
I grew up a very normal life, I would say. And
normal by Dutch standards, right? Very quiet, very
very, quaint, normal life. Mm-hmm. And I thought that all drugs are bad and you shouldn't do drugs because you're going to get addicted and your life is going to be a mess. And then when I turned like 17, 18, somebody offered me a joint. I'm like, oh, fuck it. I'll smoke this joint. And then I found out it actually helps me, relax my mind and helps me focus on things. So I didn't skip a day at some point and for the past 15 years.
So it's that's funny. I would say that my experience is actually somewhat similar in the sense that it was nothing, and then once I got into it, it was basically every day from kind of the beginning onward to the point I'm at right now. Okay, so and again, and I've actually I've been to your house. I've seen the tulip fields behind your house, and it is a very quaint, beautiful, very quiet spot. But like you said, and from traditional Dutch standards. Like you said, it's. I would say, even though people think about the Netherlands and Amsterdam and everything else, Amsterdam is Amsterdam. The rest of Holland and the rest of the Netherlands, not exactly the same, right? Right. A little more conservative, right? Well, I know when we were out there, some of the things that, really impressed me when it comes to Dutch lighting innovations and as a company. And one of the things I really like to mention is that, DLI is not a lighting company, right? It is, an LED company, right? There's so many companies that really focus on just one technology right now. And quite frankly, those companies are having a really difficult time because they can't diversify. They can't say, okay, for this particular situation, this is your best option. For that situation, it's a different option. The beauty of DLI is it's a full lighting company. We have everything from, multi-layer LEDs, top light LEDs. We still have HPS technology. Obviously, you can see some right there. That's the greenhouse spectrum that's being put to work there in the beautiful glass houses of Holland, which I had the opportunity to see. And, for me, it really helped just go, wow. One, I get the Dutch perspective when it comes to growing a bit more. I mean, even going into these massive, tomato or orchid or chrysanthemum or whatever greenhouses, didn't really matter. The thing that shocked me the most was how clean they were, how stable the environment was, and how few people there were. It's ran so efficient. So it really, and having worked with, even when the double-ended technology came in and working with Jair back then, and of course we work with Jair, now again as well. But when he brought that technology in, everybody thought it was so crazy. Like, what do you mean? We got big hoods. This is not how you do stuff. And then you go over there and you go, oh, okay. Wow. We're doing child's play.
It's a very interesting point in a way, because I think the first uses of lighting for plants was sort of the underground cannabis industry that really started to use lights, because then they could put plants in places where people couldn't see them.
Yeah, absolutely.
A little bit later, the horticultural side went into lighting tomatoes, like in the late 80s, early 90s. And now this whole development is more on the greenhouse side, where the
right. I mean, to your point,
in climate control and in doing things efficiently and having a whole plan down for, like, you put your seed in the ground or your cutting or your starter plant, and which day from when you plant it, it's going to yield its first fruit. Like, that's technology down to.
Oh man, to say it's down to a science is almost stupid to say, because it's, they know what kind of yields they're looking at by what kind of micromoles are coming in by having this stable environment. And, I know that glass houses in Holland were around for a very long time, but the first ones were actually subterranean, if I remember correctly, right? So it'd be like some kind of covering up top, but there was an underground element to it.
The first, like, glass house, I would say,
right?
It's not really a house when it's less high than your knee.
Right.
But they use those to keep the heat in a little bit and get a better growing climate. So maybe the growing season is a little bit extended.
Sure.
Maybe in the 1800s somewhere.
Yep.
Then they started building slightly higher ones where they could have maybe grapes and those kind of things. But really, the professional greenhouses that we see today is something that started maybe late 80s, early 90s.
Right. It's actually fairly modern. And I, forgive my ignorance a little bit until I went over there. You can still see some of the old legacy ones. And you were even able to point those out, be like, all right, well, that's kind of from this era. You can see how they're shorter. And a lot of them actually don't have light supplementation. That also surprised me. Yeah. It's only the really high end crops, right? That's the only ones you can actually legitimize putting in expensive
The trend has been for greenhouses to grow taller over the years. Mm-hmm. They used to be maybe 3.5 meters, and now they're close to 8.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And it's because if you keep more air volume in, you also have more buffer in your climate. And
totally.
Other sources.
Yeah, the cubic space, not just the square footage. Yep. No, it makes a lot of sense. And I'm still kind of sitting here marinating on, what you said, because obviously we know, at least here in the U.S., it was mainly outdoor until the 70s. The only reason things came in from a cannabis side was because paraquat spraying and a lot of things that were going on both down in Mexico and then started happening here in the U.S. So people got very afraid of their crops getting sprayed by a deadly poison. Go figure. Mm-hmm. So that's where obviously a lot of stuff went inside. That's where HPS technology came in, because obviously that was a streetlight type technology. But to your point, that wasn't being done yet. We did. It's so automatic to us thinking about a greenhouse, a glass house, having supplemental lighting, things like that. But really, it is still a fairly new concept, right? So even all this technology is still very much progressing.
But you also have to imagine the cost that's involved. Mm-hmm. Like a kilogram of tomatoes is not worth that much on a wholesale level.
No, I mean, to
put high wattage lighting over a crop that yields very cheap product.
Right. You better be efficient.
Do things quite perfectly. So the first reason that they really started lighting tomatoes a lot is to make sure you can deliver to your customer all the time. Also, when you have a couple of bad weeks of weather, because you get a contract with your supermarket that's delivered to. But they want to have a stable supply.
Yeah, no, makes sense. I mean, right, if you're going to have that contract and they want to be able to say, I can guarantee this much output. I mean, I know when we were there at the, I'm not even going to attempt the name of it because I'll just butcher it. But at the tomato spot, they were saying something on the level of around, 10 cents a kilo profit. I mean, nothing, right? And so that has to be so efficient. And what really clicked with me is I'm looking at these, the best of the best new technology that's in there, the DLIs that are running, that they're constantly, consistently going across all their facilities, replacing room by room. And I'm going, okay, so they can make this kind of high-end technology actually work for tomatoes when they're getting 10 cents a kilo. And to think that we can't make that work for cannabis, that was just something I was like, we're talking about a much higher value crop. And if we get our efficiencies down a little bit, because reality is, labor is 40%. Of your overhead, if you're lucky. Could be more if you're screwing up,
One of the most important things for these growers is to have a quality fixture that will last many, many years. So the longer it lasts before they have to buy a new one, the better it is for them, because the purchase price of the thing they will make back on the tomatoes at some point, and it's the electricity price really that's more interesting in the meantime.
Sure. But with something like that too, they can look at that ROI and then go, okay, I know exactly how long this is going to take and how many turns it's going to take for this to pay itself off and everything else. I mean, they've got it down to an absolute science. Well, speaking of that, and you actually, it's a nice segue. Do you want to speak anything on degradation? And, obviously not all lights are made the same. We have talked about binning on here before. Jair was definitely big about kind of getting people to understand, not all LEDs are necessarily created the same. There is industrial LEDs, there's horticultural LEDs, and there's a whole bunch of shit in the middle. Maybe talk a little bit about the degradation, because obviously that's huge to those growers, right?
Well, I had a recent conversation with a customer who at first didn't buy DLI, but he bought a different brand from China. And we said, okay, that's fine. But please remember what degradation is. So we said, here you have a light meter. Please measure how much light you have. Keep the meter for 1 year and then measure again.
Okay. Makes sense.
The customer was missing in his veg room, so it's 18-hour lighting. He was missing 15%. So that's 15% in 1 year. So the next year, it's 15% on top of that, which means you've lost more than 30% already.
Absolutely.
Which means it's not a viable fixture anymore. But this was a fixture that cost half of what a DLI fixture costs.
But
over a lifespan of 5 years, which we guarantee at DLI, you'll have to buy 2.5 times more value of the China lights to make up. So in the end, it looks cheap, but you're going to spend much more money. And it took this customer 1 year and 2 measurements, plus a very simple piece of math to find out that he needs to buy our lights.
Right.
As soon as these are degraded too much.
Right. I mean, cheap is cheap, guys, right? And I totally understand. And the reality is, and I like that you make that point, it's not, I can take any piece of crap out of the box and run it for a year and do pretty damn well. I promise you. I don't even need a label on the damn thing. I can take any light, any shitbox LED from China, and I promise I'll do fine for a year. Then you're going to see the things just fall off a cliff. That's a reality. So, but again, people look at the price tag, this price tag versus this price tag. And it's, it's hard for people to really, and if they don't run the numbers and they can't prove it to themselves, which obviously when we're not talking about, especially whether it's black market growers or small hobby growers, things like that, like nobody's doing calculations like that. Not like the guys are doing in some of these major greenhouses. And also what you're starting to see, a lot more in the cannabis side of things, because efficiency is king. When the unit price goes down like it has, you better be producing quality product at a proper price, or you're not going to be in business.
I do have to say that many of the larger LP type companies that have been in business since their place legalized, so depending on what state or country, many of them that have been in business a long time and survived a couple of crashes in the market price, they are approaching the point where they have these things down to a level where they know, hey, I'm feeding this at this EC, this is going to come out, my plant's going to respond to it like this, I'm going to increase my light level to this. And
they're able to match. They're matching their variables very well, right? Because we always
those growers are far and in between, like difficult to find. So I would say they are the most valuable people in the cannabis industry now because they have the recipe to have success with your system at a low overhead.
Yeah, and you do work in Canada as well, and so I know that there are some very large grows, and of course there was a huge boom and quite a bit of a bust, like that you mentioned there. But now the people that have made it through, and there were some massive facilities, that were up there. Now the people that are there, they are able to, make this stuff more spreadsheetable, if you will, right? Whereas for the longest time, we're talking pounds per light, and it's like, well, what's a light? Well, that's 1,000 watts. Well, you know what I mean? It's like the stuff we were talking about is just ridiculous.
Yeah. I've been at LPs that have maybe 100 lights and use an off-the-shelf, put it together kind of system, like a Trollmaster control. Bad sensors and all these things, they grow their wheat with it. It's what they want to do.
Well, look, you get what you pay for. Not everybody is, not everybody's our customer. There are, it's okay.
If it's a small room and you have more control over it, yes, your sensor might be 2 degrees off, but you know about this, so you set all your settings differently.
Right.
Wouldn't fly in a large company because it would generate lots of mistakes. But if you're one guy operation, it's just fine.
Right. Yeah. No problem. Now, one thing that
hold on. I've seen systems at greenhouse or not greenhouse, but large indoor grows where they log just about everything and even start to use AI and stuff to model what they can do better. So there's a very wide range in the cannabis industry, as you know, also in building quality, not just how people grow, but building the facility first. There's a massive difference from even in bigger companies. Sometimes you see something like, really have to save a couple bucks on this?
Right.
And then other places you're like, you really didn't need to spend all this money on something simple.
Yeah, I can't tell you how many times I've seen that where it's like, wow, okay, so you tried to save money here, but you overdid it here. And again, but this is a process.
It's super nice to see how the industry can develop and find the things that are good and then the things that are not so good. And then over time, things will become, like if you go to a Dutch greenhouse for tomatoes, you might, if you walk inside, you probably don't know which greenhouse it is based on looking around because they all look pretty much identical.
Right.
Because it's a certain system that just works well.
Yeah. And when they get the system down, they rock it. And I know there's one thing that a subject that we had talked about too is just like the quantifiability of light, which is kind of interesting, right? And so when you were talking about, matching those ECs to the environment and VPD and things like that, so really, really like getting all your variables matched up, right? Because it is a law of the minimum, right? Liebig's law of the minimum. If you have all these things tip top, your nutrients are great, your environment's great, but you don't have enough light, well, that's your minimum. You're only gonna produce to your minimum.
You explain it well, but it's actually the way they teach it in university. It's the other way around. You have sort of a ceiling.
Yeah.
And it's called your maximum attainable yield.
Yeah.
It's the maximum that's theoretically possible within the genetics of the plant.
Yep.
And the amount of light that you give it.
Yep.
Because that's the energy that goes in.
Yep.
And the plant causes as a conversion rate.
See, it's interesting because the way the graphic that they give, we do it from like the bottom up and almost look at it more like a graph, right? So you look at what your maximum is your minimum. That makes sense. But I also understand what you're saying, like flipping it over, and it probably actually is a better mental graphic doing it like, damn it.
Whatever way.
Dang it. But anyway, it's the concept.
Your yield can be lowered by not having the right temperature.
Yep.
No water availability, lack of nutrients, these things.
Yep.
And then there's the third level, which is like pests and diseases.
And I like that, it's tough to quantify nutrients, right? People can know maybe a difference in testing, or maybe it looks better, or maybe there's more color. Like a lot of the stuff in nutrients, you do have your final totals, right? Which people are always looking at. Oh, I got this many pounds out of this room, and they use that as a metric. But it's tough to have. Nutrients are more difficult to quantify, whereas something like light, you're talking 8 to 12 photons per CO2 fixed. So there's a pretty there's a very direct relationship in how light is acquired, attained, stored, and used, right? Because I think one of the biggest misconceptions that people make.
So
go ahead.
To get into that, you can quantify how much light is necessary to make sugar for a plant. Mm-hmm. You can calculate how much, based on the weight of the plant, the temperature, and all these things, how much it's going to burn in the night, how much it needs to stay alive during the day. You know all of these things, but you don't really know exactly how much calcium is needed to do that.
That's exactly. That's where we're and that's where a lot of the unknown is. And I think also part of the issue is that people, and we're the ones that have told them this, we hand somebody and call it plant food. Well, that's nothing. That's not plant food. That's structure. And that's for metabolic processes, right? The reality is food is light, is the sun, is photons. That's really what food is. Plant food. That's true plant food, right? Even though we call the stuff in bottles and salts and things like you call it plant food, but really it's not.
It's a definition thing.
Exactly. But I was looking at that. So for me, it's
in the same way that with the electric car, the fuel technically is being burned in the fuel plant or whatever makes the electricity.
Still burning dinosaurs, baby.
Temporary storage before it's being used.
Yeah. No, and I mean I like looking at at light and quality of light as the heartbeat of an operation, right? Everything else is going to support light, but if you don't have proper light, whether it's from the sun or artificial or the mix of the two, you're never going to attain the yields. You're never going to attain the goals that you have there, because again, going back to the minimums, that's what it's going to be. Now, riddle me this: as far as quality of light goes, because and I want to talk a little bit about the UV as well, right? Because we've and even going back to what you originally said, artificial lighting indoors, this is pretty new stuff. We're only a few decades in. So clearly there's new technology that's coming out, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to go, okay, there's going to be more than just 400 to 700 nanometers outside, right? There's things that are outside of the photosynthetic region. I like to kind of compare it to the 17 plant essential nutrients. Yes, there's 17, but there's also all kinds of plant beneficial elements, minerals, biostimulants that are out there. Are they essential? Well, maybe not, but they're surely beneficial. So I look at UV a bit the same way. What do you think about that?
Yeah, definitely. And it's normally the visible light is what we call the PAR range, sort of almost exactly the visible range. And technically, for a plant, it doesn't matter which color or which nanometer it receives. It will also always be the same amount of photons to turn it into a sugar molecule. But what we have seen, for instance, in the UV trial, is that in a high light level with UV, the conversion rate of the total plant genetic, like your limitation of how much it can do with or without UV, is different. So we had a 10% higher yield with UV with the same amount of PAR light. So the conversion with the light to sugar is still exactly the same. It's just that the plant in other processes becomes more efficient. Interesting. What those things are, we don't know, because that requires years more of research.
A lot more study. Right. And I know you guys have been...
And that's a good start.
But to give you guys some credit, you guys are actually out there and attempting to do some of this research, or working with people to do some of this research and getting some university research done and white papers and things, which, at least here in the U.S., that we've always been very much restricted. First off, we don't know a whole lot about plants as it is, and then cannabis has been something that is as a very low amount of study. And again, the way that science works is it's a building block process, and one of the frustrations and limitations we talked about before is that it's a reduction of variables. So you answer one thing, just like you said, oh yeah, it's cool, we see that. Why, how, where? Well, that literally just makes a bunch more questions. I answer one question, I get 10 more. I answer those 10, I get 100 more. It's a process. It's time.
It's a rabbit hole. And like 20 years ago, I was like, okay, let's see what this is.
One thing I want to talk, and I know you wanted to talk a little bit about quality of light as well. So even like without talking specifics, but it's kind of like an old TV, right? In the sense that these LEDs come off as a light comes off as full spectrum. The reality is there's multiple different colors in there, right? And I know even like the green light thing, right, where we always felt really safe with green light. Oh, it doesn't win. It reflects it.
Go over it in a short historical summary.
Perfect.
Like, I think the first LED light for indoor growing that I saw and that actually got a sample of was maybe 2007-ish, 6-7-ish.
Now, why would you need an indoor light in 2007?
To grow herbs.
Go ahead.
But that had 25% blue LEDs and 75% red. Looking back now, I don't know if they were far red LEDs or whatever, but they didn't really support plant life, I can tell. The idea was blue and red are the best.
Right.
So with LED, we can make things more efficient than other lighting.
Right.
Sounds good in theory.
It does, but
it won't work. Then many more years of research found out that in a greenhouse, it actually does work because you have a little bit of sunlight. So then the idea was, from some companies in the early LED times with cannabis, let's add like 5% white light and still have super pink light for efficiency, which worked to some degree. Except it's still really bad to work in. Yield-wise, it works okay, but the quality is not there. And it's not that much of a difference with the amount of power used.
So the efficiency factor is pretty small.
Well, the LED already improves on a lot, even if it's a white LED compared to a red LED. And especially 5-6 years ago, the red LEDs were not that efficient as they are now. So light fixtures might be around 3 micromole per joule for a pink one. Mm-hmm. And 2.6 or 2.7 for a white one. So that's a small 10% difference, where your quality with the white one is going to be much better.
Interesting. And then where did the progression go from there?
Well, then you got into a market where people initially developed the light fixture to be the best for growing with limited knowledge. So they may not have been the absolute best yet, but it went into the economy side of things, where people started looking at, hey, if I use this type of LED, which is slightly less in the spectrum I want to, but it's much cheaper or it's more efficient, so we can claim a better number.
Right.
So you got all these fixtures on the market, which in a way were like a second generation LED, where people were just selling some weird stuff. And then we're now at like a third generation where we actually really know what we're doing. And
again, it is still
the last thing I want to say on that is that the market exists of a few companies that know what they're doing, and the rest is all the cheapest shit you can imagine just to manipulate. And obviously we have talked about that on the show before with Jair, just this manipulation of like how to either overdrive cheaper diodes or overdrive less diodes to get an initial output, but obviously get higher degradation that way faster. I mean, like it's one of those things where it's not really lying necessarily, but they're manipulating shit on the back end for their numbers. It's outright lying.
Well, I mean,
they will give a warranty on something that is not going to last a year. But they also know that the number that they put on the warranty to call is not going to work.
But I'm also saying that the higher efficiency number they put in there by putting in these cheaper diodes and things like that, obviously they know that too, but they can put the number on and say, hey.
Maybe it has that efficiency for the first 5 seconds and then it's frying itself.
Right. That was one thing that I always found interesting. Is
it's really simple in this world. You get what you pay for.
Really?
And if something looks fancy and over-engineered, like there's a few LED brands that try to make things look really, really expensive.
Right. Spaceshipy.
Yeah, then you should expect a higher price. And what we try to do is function after form, or form after function, sorry. So the thing needs to do a certain certain thing. So what's the best way to build something to do this purpose? And that's where you get a fixture like a Zenith, which is like a low profile, good cooling, not too big, not too heavy.
No, it's slim. And I mean, to your point, but your guys' form is also, you guys clearly pay attention to form as well. You have very good looking fixtures, whether it's a DE, whether it's a Zenith, but I also appreciate the functionality goal first.
I come a little bit out of the airplane and airline industry from my upbringing. And they always say with airplanes, if it looks good, it flies well. So if you design a plane that flies really well, it also probably will look good.
Right.
And it's the same thing with a light fixture. If it's designed to be proper and do its function really well, it will also look good.
Yes. No, totally. You're absolutely right. I mean, I guess as a slight aside to that, what kind of wild shit do you like to do in your free time? I know, like, sometimes you do some glider stuff. Haven't you? Like, don't you like?
That's years ago.
Yeah.
Gliders.
Yeah. Glider flying.
I'm finding my life to do that anymore.
Not crazy enough for it anymore, huh? I know you like to do some fishing and stuff out there as well, right?
Yeah, fishing is nice. Cooking is a big hobby.
That's right. And you recently got back from Thailand. I know you brought back some new utensils and some tools. So I'm expecting that your Tom Yum is like going to be spot on next time I'm in Holland.
It's going to be bit.
Yeah. Did you get a bit of callousness to the spice in the couple weeks you were over there?
Yeah. So I asked one chef, like, please give me just regular Thai spice, like, don't hold back. And tried to mess with me. I got a pat krapao, which was 50% chili.
Whoa. Yeah, wow. And the worst part about that is it ain't today, it's tomorrow,
That's why they have the little shower on a
Now, so obviously you do, we mentioned you get over to Canada, obviously you live in Holland. I'm assuming you're probably jumping over to Germany, doing a little work over there. Obviously we've seen each other in Spain a number of times and spent together time over there. You get down to South Africa, you do work down there. You just got back from Thailand. Yeah, I mean, as far as like what's going on.
That was a holiday though.
Well, that was a holiday, but you have been there for work too, right? Or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. See, well, I said work the first time, holiday the second. And what is the scene over there? What's the quality of the herb like? Like what's, I know things have changed and I don't know if you were kind of there before the crackdown.
Thailand is an interesting country and it's much more hype based than the US. I think the US is pretty much, if there's a hype, things are big.
Sure.
But Thailand, if there's a hype, everybody's doing it. It's crazy. So, like when they legalized a few years ago, they gave away a couple million clones to people. So I think the getting out and it's not going anywhere anymore is also heavier there. So for a moment, nobody wanted to do anything. And now it's getting back to a level where people are like, okay, the law is not going to change. Things are going to be stable. We're going to have a normal industry. Well, normal.
Yeah, well,
takes a couple of years to get there.
And then it flattens out.
But when I was there the first time last year, after the legalization, they had already 1,500 shops in Bangkok where you could buy cannabis.
Good Lord.
You really didn't have to walk more than 100 foot.
Sounds like pharmacies and Juarez, you know what I mean? Jeez,
that's more than Denver.
Yeah, that's crazy. Well, it literally made me. It reminded me of that statistic that was in Denver at one point in time. There's more dispensaries than Starbucks in Denver, which was a real statistic.
Crazy.
But that's not near 1,500. I can tell you.
Prices were ridiculous. It was like $15 US for a gram.
Whoa! So they were printing money for a sec.
Except the wholesale price was more like $4. So the shops were trying to make so much money on it.
Yeah, they were trying to get on that hype wave. They were trying to grab, it was a money grab. They were trying to grab everything they could right off the rip because they didn't know how long it was going to last.
But prices halved, I think, now in a year time.
Yeah, I think it actually has come back up a bit. I heard at one point in time, I mean, it was like, I don't know the exact
price
numbers,
definitely, but the street price for the shops to sell to consumers, that only went down slowly.
So it's still probably around 10 a gram, something like that. It's not going to be that You think it'd be way cheaper than that?
A few weeks ago, I bought some good quality at Greenhouse for around 480 baht. So that's maybe $12.
What is it? What is it baht to dollar? Is it 60 baht?
No,
I guess
like
you're
40.
talking euro. 40 euro? So probably like
40. So 480 is $12.
Okay. Yeah. So not as cheap as I would honestly.
No, but then Greenhouse is in the center of Bangkok. They have a very nice shop there. It's definitely the one you want to walk into because it's the nicest one.
Well, they always do a great job with their shops. I mean, they wherever they're at, let's be honest, they always kick ass with that.
And I have to go there because their cannabis is grown with our lights.
It's obligatory, folks. I mean, this is market research is what this actually is. It's, I feel so bad for you that you have to go do that.
And I just know that I get good quality with that. That's also why.
Yeah, of course. No, they've got a name. They've got a brand. They have, I see Josh has got the multi-layer up there. Again,
as soon as you go to like the islands in Thailand, then the price halves from Bangkok.
Really?
I love the multi-layer. That's the one that I'm actually getting in my garden as I'm moving here. So, yeah, Shout out to the multi.
The multi. And it says it right there in the name, folks. It's for tiered growing, whether it's double or triple stack, although I really wouldn't go triple stack if I were you. Yeah, double stack is ideal.
I really never understood the people that use a multi-layer fixture and then put a whole room full of them.
No. And again, but that's misapplied technology.
It will work. You just can't access anything that's above it. And
right. And they don't really work together that well.
Things are in the way.
Right. There's a lot of stuff in the way. The microclimates, they don't really work well together. They don't have the optics to really work. It's just misapplied technology, which I like to tell people all the time. Hey,
I do think it's an education thing because
100% it is.
People that think with LEDs, you have to be close to your crop.
Wait a minute, are you telling me, Jeroen, you're trying to tell me that it's the same amount of light, whether it's up here or right here? You're trying to tell me that the light doesn't disappear with distance? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
What about the inverse square law?
No, but
that's what a lot of people think, though.
So electricity is difficult to explain to people because it's not a physical concept. But you can use water as an analogy in many ways. And same thing you can do with light. Like if you put many drips spread out over your plant, it will do this. But if you have a big hose and you put it on the top and you put your thumb on it, it'll do the same thing and spread it out like this. And that's how you can explain a top light with water. And it's maybe a strange concept, but it's something that people can visualize a little bit more easier. Yeah,
it's definitely more concrete. That's definitely an interesting way to look at it, without a doubt. And and it's one of the things that was a very difficult concept for us, especially when the DE came over. It's hang them higher, don't burn the plants, don't be too intense. It's the same amount of light. Those photons don't disappear. Isaac Newton taught us that energy is neither consumed or destroyed. It's just converted, right? So this electrical energy is heat and light.
The inverse square law works for a regular old light bulb that you put in the middle of a room.
Sure.
And light goes to all directions. But as soon as you put a reflector, then half of it that should go down or up goes down.
Yeah. Yeah. And the reality is, and the point is photons, until they hit something, which if there's nothing between the light and the plants, until it hits something, i.e. chlorophyll, it's going to keep moving. So that was a concept that was, I think, rather difficult for a lot of people in the U.S. to wrap their head around, because everything we were doing was big hoods right on top of the plants. And of course, then we were also cooling the bulbs. So now the spectrum was different. The output was different. But, hey, we had to learn. It's a process.
So you know why we have small hoods on the HPS lights that we made in the Netherlands for greenhouses?
Well, because you don't want to shadow out the sun. You want to make it nice and slick. Why do you guys think you did a vertical ballast and not horizontal ballast? Because it was slightly less shadow. I know these things. And
then with HPS, there's a much more interesting thing.
Go on.
Especially with double-ended. Like a single-ended's not too important, but a double-ended definitely. The temperature of the lamp needs to be at a certain place for the lamp to have the right output.
Absolutely.
So I've actually seen an HPS fixture. I won't name the company, but they still make them.
Apparently.
That has
allegedly
ventilation inside the hood, so you can cool your lamp. And I'm like, that's the most stupid thing you can do to a double-ended lamp, because you will break it before its lifetime.
And you want to run it at that temperature.
Like you're expecting from it.
Right. Yep. Yep. Again, that was a concept that was very difficult for us to get around our heads, that it's like, no. Yeah, I realize it's hot. Yeah, it's supposed to be hot.
Oh, and they call it color temperature because it's an actual temperature.
inside that tube, it is.
Yeah.
A couple thousand degrees, like 2,000. Sorry, that's what's, I don't know what's in Fahrenheit, but like 2,000 Celsius inside it.
Doesn't it cross over somewhere?
As it gets that high, it's about 1,800 Fahrenheit. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Josh. It's lovely having the guy back there. He has that all-knowing computer and shit, so he's always staying on top of us. Well, for the record, I think this is it's always fun chatting with you, Arun. Always great to see you. Always good to hear your voice. We've had some great times together, some different places around the world. And I guess, you know what? We've made it this far. If our listeners have made it this far with us, yeah, you've been to a lot of interesting places. You've done a lot of interesting things. What's the wildest situation that you've ever been in? What's the wildest? I think I might know, but... Maybe I okay.
What level you would?
Let's. Yeah. I mean, now I realize who I just asked that question. I'm like, oh shit.
About the wildest cannabis growing situation.
There you go.
One of the interesting places we went to many years ago is in Swaziland.
Yeah.
And it was quite nice to walk through the forest, the jungle, and get some football field-sized cannabis grows with 16-foot plants, amazing land races, and like very good genetics that are so pure because nobody's messed with them and
right.
something foreign into them.
Jeroen, I really do appreciate it. If there's anything last you want to say, if you want to say anything about where you think lighting technology is going to go, if where you really feel like, because again, we see this as a progression. It's not over. Where are we going from here?
It's interesting. I don't know where it's going to go, but the red LED has passed 80% efficiency. The best ones are 83, maybe more now.
And that's a huge benchmark to cross, right? That 80% was huge.
You get 17% more. You have something that you put electricity in, and the only thing that comes out is light.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, is there a reason to find a different technology?
Well, if you had 100% efficiency, absolutely not. Now,
but if you're really, really close to it, like you can get a couple percent more closer, but then it's lifespan that's going to be the next thing.
Well, okay, real quick. What about UV and LED? Why don't you tell us why that's a problem? Or what the issue is there?
UV by itself is kind of harsh for all materials.
Yeah.
Except, for instance, glass can handle UV quite well. So that's why if you want to make UV, our UV fixture is a better technology to make UV for a long time at a lower cost.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
UV LEDs are not that efficient. They degrade faster.
Period.
And they're small wavelengths. Like it's not a full spectrum from.
Well, that's that's what I was going to say too, right? Like, let's say you have a UVA diode. That's going to be very narrow bandwidth. That's not going to be all of UVA. So in theory, you'd have to have like 20 different diodes just in UVA to get that full spectrum, right? So you could say that there's UV in the unit, but reality is none of them have anything close to full spectrum UV in any LED anywhere in the world currently, correct? Okay. Just want to make sure of that. And again, I that's why I do think, we have a gas powered bulb. I look at it and I go, well, where does, what's the sun? A burning ball of gas. What's going on in that UV? A burning ball of gas. I do think that LED absolutely has its place, but I love the thought of being able to supplement high end, new, interesting technology right alongside either HPS or LED, because at the end of the day, it's just widening your spectrum regardless of what you're using it with.
I think if you like to grow with HPS and you're going to continue doing it because your economic situation in terms of power price, etc., makes it work, adding the UV to your HPS setup is one of the best things you can do, because HPS it lacks a little bit of blue by itself. It's just the nature of the technology. There's not enough blue in it. Mm-hmm. The UV adds not a shitload of blue, but it adds a little bit of blue to compensate for that black. And on top of that, it will, of course, do the UV benefits. Mm-hmm. But the extra light that you get, the invisible light from a UV light, is especially beneficial for HPS.
Interesting. You see, and I didn't even look at it as a particular coupling with HPS as well from the blue side. That's a really nice bit of insight here at the end there. I very much appreciate that. If there's anybody that you want to shout out or say hello to or anything like that, again, thank you for coming through. This is always fun.
I appreciate everybody that's still here listening to our little talk.
Yeah. If anybody has any other questions too, if you got some specific questions in technology, you can hit us up through the Jug Dealers. I'd be more than happy to get some of these questions along.
And you can check them out over on jugdealers.shop. So if you want to go just peruse what we have in stock, go check it out.
Yeah, check it out. Again, jugdealers.net. You can check out all the podcasts, jugdealers.shop. You can also get samples, jugdealer.net/samples with an S. Thank you so much, guys, for coming out. Until next time, from the Jug Den, we'll see you later.